Welcome to the engineering workshop. In this episode, we're going to use the engineering design process to build these two bumper plate caddies. So the first step in the engineering design process is to define the problem. My problem statement is to construct a device to hold Rogue Echo bumper plates in a usable position near our half rack. My wife and I bought 365 pounds worth of plates from Rogue. You can see the breakdown there under constraints, and these plates come with dimensions that were offered by Rogue. You see that on the right hand side of the screen, and so I'm going to use those dimensions to inform the design when we get into the prototyping stage. The second step is to do some background research and see if there's already solutions to the problem you're looking at. I like to list the pros and cons and then use those pros and cons to influence my design. So the specific requirements I have for this project, in terms of construction, it will be made from wood. I really like the casters, so I'm going to use that. And I want easy access to each plate. I'm going to go with the horizontal design. This allows access to all plates. And to decrease the footprint, I'm going to build two caddies, one for each side of the half rack. They'll be identical and they will carry the same weights. This will be nice because it'll allow my wife and I to load the bar from each side of the rack simultaneously. And then I'm also going to use some woodworking joinery to increase the strength and make it a little unique from the products we've already seen. So looking at all the specific constraints of the project and the specific design requirements, we go into brainstorming a solution. And I've already said that each caddy will hold the same number of plates. I am going to use construction lumber for this project and scrap plywood to keep costs down, and I don't think there's a need for any specific kind of wood. So moving right into prototyping, I use SketchUp to draw this model. And as you can see, using the specific dimensions of the Rogue bumper plates, I drew this horizontal caddy to hold all the plates in line. The cross members, which have the dovetails on them, are separated with 1/8 of an inch clearance for each of the plates, so they do have a specific hold that they go into. This view shows the dovetails in the frame members and in the cross members, and I'm using rabbet joints on the end. Everything will be held together with glue, and the plywood is screwed in from the bottom. I used layout to help make the build plans for this, and those will be available with a link in the description. With the project underway, the first step is to cut all the pieces from the cut list. Just simplifies everything, and then I have all the pieces there to start cutting joinery. And I finally got all the pieces cut. I'm now going to use a dovetail bit and a router to cut the dovetails into the cross members. I set up a quick jig on a bench top that I'm working off of and started cutting. This took a lot longer than I expected, and I don't think I would do this again. Once I got all the dovetails cut and the cross members, I go to make the frame. To do this, I'm again making 4 frame pieces. I built a jig, and I used that jig to cut all 4 frame pieces at the same time. And this also took a lot longer than I expected it to take. Probably something I could do different the next time would be to cut dados where all these dovetail sockets were going to be, hog out most of the material. That way the router wasn't doing all the work. That would probably definitely speed things up. And you can see that's the final cut right there. And then I just went down. Every bumper plate that I'm trying to hold has to get its own dovetail socket cut for the cross member to separate those dovetails. And you can see just over and over and over again, just keeping doing the same thing. The next piece I'm making is the frame ends, which you can see in the model here have rabbet joints cut into them. Again, same 2x6 construction. And I'm just going to set up a dado stack on the table saw and use a sacrifice fence, and I'll just be able to cut that clean rabbet joint right there on the table saw. With all the joinery cut, I can finally start assembling the frame and the cross members, just using some tight bond glue in the dovetail sockets, and then I'll begin to slide the cross members down into those dovetails. It takes a little bit of force on one end. One end was also kind of loose, and I think my jig might have been just a little bit off. As you can see here on my right side, it takes some persuasion with a mallet, and then on the left, it just seemed to drop right in. So something different maybe to pay attention to next time I were to do this. But I think, again, with all the work that it took to cut these dovetails, I really think just doing some basic dados would probably work just as well. We've also got some good tongue action going right there. So once I got it all glued, I used a nail gun just to kind of hold it in place. I didn't really want to put clamps on it. It just didn't seem to be worth it, and I wasn't trying to hide nail holes or anything like that. So here I'm attaching the frame in, same thing, glue in the rabbet joints, and then use the nail gun to hold it in place in the place of clamps. Worked pretty well. I haven't had any issues putting the bumper plates in there with the rabbet joint coming out. A dovetail might have been stronger, but I just didn't see it worth the effort on that portion of the frame. And once I get it all put together, I do a quick test fit, and you can see all the bumper plates fit in there nicely. It was a big sigh of relief. Didn't know what I was going to do if one of them didn't fit. Now to attach the bottom, I'm using some more tight bond glue over all the frame pieces there just to help hold it in place. I was kind of worried a little bit that if dropping bumper plates might help that plywood separate, but haven't had any issues so far. Pre-drill all the holes and countersink. We got a nice bit that does the countersinking with the pre-drill, and then using basic construction screws here. Nothing special, just to hold it all in. And then I go back and I end up putting screws along the cross members just to add some more strength. As again, some of those heavier plates like the 45s, if they get dropped in there, I didn't want them to break that plywood off the bottom. The next step is to just put a quick sand on everything using 120 grit on a random orbital sander. Just knocking down all the sharp edges and making sure we don't get splinters when we use it, and just kind of cleaning everything up and sanding off all the dried glue and stuff like that. This took a while, as always. Sanding is kind of a pain, but it's nothing out of the ordinary for a basic woodworking project. Next step was to add those swivel casters. I just marked out the hole locations and then did a quick pilot drill. Did have to remove that screw in the corner to allow that caster to fit, but got to reuse the same hole. And that drill bit was never seen again. Continuing with the bit I should have used all along, I was able to finish putting the casters on there. And a quick time lapse shows putting the casters on the other three corners. They work really well, really happy with them, and I'm glad I went with swivel casters as opposed to straight casters. And this shows you the final product. All the bumper plates in there, and next to the half rack, they fit really nicely, and they fit just on the edge of the mat. My wife and I are really happy with the way these turned out. If you're interested for the build plans I used for the bumper plate caddy and the half rack, there's a link in the description below. Huge time saver in the shop, and I really recommend it. One of the final steps of the engineering design process is to test the solution. Does it fit the constraints and meet the requirements that you set out in your earlier design? And does it work the way you intended? Well, thanks so much for watching the video. I had a lot of fun making it, and they turned out great. I think they look great, and they've been working really well. My wife and I have been using them for about 2 months now, and haven't had any issues with them, especially when I'm like tired after a heavy set. And I just drop the weight back in there. I haven't had any issue with the plywood coming out of the bottom. Or dovetails have held up well, hold the frame together well, and they maneuver around pretty well. Like even on this like rubber mat, we're able to push them around and move them if we want to do deadlifts in front of the rack or something like that. But anyway, thanks again for watching. Up next, I've built a miter station. So if you want to watch me work through the engineering design process to build a miter station that fits my design requirements, subscribe to the channel. And you can see that video when it posts. It's probably going to be a multi-part series. It's a pretty big project, but super excited about that. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Until next time.